A customs officer made Bruce Lee apologize? No. Bruce made the officer understand why respect matters more than authority. March 8, 1971. LAX International Terminal. Bruce Lee returning from Hong Kong. Customs officer Donald Patterson recognized him from the Green Hornet. Decided to make an example. Martial arts weapons are illegal. I'm inspecting your bag thoroughly. Patterson dumped Bruce's belongings onto the table. In front of 50 passengers. Made comments about kung fu contraband. Found a sealed letter. Private correspondence. Tore it open. Read it aloud to humiliate Bruce. Then Patterson saw the signature. Major General William Morrison, U.S. Army. Thanking Bruce for teaching his son. Patterson had just violated federal law. In front of witnesses. While harassing someone with connections to Pentagon. What Bruce did next taught Patterson more than any complaint could have. This is the story of power meeting wisdom. Authority meeting respect. And why the strongest response isn't always the harshest one. The flight from Hong Kong to Los Angeles had been 14 hours. Bruce Lee was exhausted. Jet lag was hitting hard. His body felt like it was still somewhere over the Pacific Ocean, while his mind tried to adjust to Los Angeles time. 3 weeks in Hong Kong. Visiting his mother. Seeing old friends. Teaching seminars to packed rooms of eager students who still viewed him as local hero even though he'd been living in America for years. Meeting with film producers about potential projects that might never happen. The usual dance of trying to build a career that bridged two cultures, two film industries, two worlds. Bruce was 30 years old, still years away from the international fame that Enter the Dragon would bring. Still grinding. Still teaching martial arts to private students in Los Angeles. Still taking occasional television work when it came. Still trying to convince Hollywood that Asian actor could be leading man instead of sidekick. Still broke most of the time despite working constantly. But optimistic. Always optimistic. Certain that eventually the world would recognize what he had to offer. The bag he carried had the evidence of his dual life. Gifts for his children. Brandon was 5 years old. Shannon was almost 2. Bruce had found toys in Hong Kong that you couldn't get in America. Small wooden puzzles. Stuffed animals. Books in both English and Chinese because he wanted his children to know both languages, both cultures. He had books for himself too. Philosophy texts. Taoist classics. Western philosophy he was studying. Training manuals. Notes from seminars he'd taught. And personal correspondence. Letters from students. Letters from friends. Including one sealed letter he hadn't opened yet. Had arrived just before he left Hong Kong. Had tucked it in his bag to read on the plane, but had been too tired. It was 3 p.m. when Bruce's flight landed. By the time he got through the gate and down at customs, it was 3:15. The international arrivals terminal at LAX was crowded. Always crowded. Hundreds of passengers from dozens of countries all funneling through customs inspection. Long lines. Tired travelers. Overworked customs officers. The usual chaos of international travel in 1971. Bruce joined the line. Maybe 50 people ahead of him. He was patient. Had done this many times. Knew the routine. Show passport. Answer questions about purpose of travel. Declare any items. Get bag inspected if officer deemed it necessary. Usually took 10 minutes. Then he'd collect his luggage and go home to Linda and the kids. Simple. Except it wasn't going to be simple. Because Officer Donald Patterson was working the inspection desk. And Patterson recognized Bruce. Patterson was 47 years old. Had been customs officer for 22 years. Seen thousands of travelers. Developed instincts about who to inspect closely and who to wave through. But Patterson's instincts were corrupted by prejudice. 22 years of profiling had taught him to associate certain nationalities with certain contraband. He stopped more Asian travelers than others. Searched them more thoroughly. Assumed they were more likely to be smuggling goods. It wasn't official policy. It was just Patterson's personal approach. His way of being thorough. His way of exercising the authority his uniform gave him. When Patterson saw Bruce approaching, Asian man, long hair, casual clothes, coming from Hong Kong, his attention sharpened. Then recognition hit. That was the guy from the Green Hornet. Kato, the kung fu sidekick. Patterson had watched that show. Hadn't particularly liked it. Thought the kung fu stuff was silly. Overhyped. Now here was the actual actor. Traveling from Hong Kong, martial arts capital of the world. Probably carrying all sorts of weapons and contraband. Good opportunity for thorough inspection. Good opportunity to demonstrate that even semi-famous people got checked carefully. Good opportunity to assert authority. Bruce reached the front of the line, stepped up to Patterson's desk, handed over his passport, smiled politely. "Good afternoon." Patterson looked at the passport, looked at Bruce. Recognition flickered across his face. "You that kung fu guy? From the Green Hornet?" "Kato." Bruce nodded. "Yes, I played that role. I am Bruce Lee. I'm returning from visiting family in Hong Kong." Patterson's expression wasn't friendly. Wasn't the usual recognition followed by a request for autograph that Bruce sometimes got. This was something else. Something calculating. Hong Kong, martial arts capital. How long were you there? 3 weeks. Teaching seminars. Visiting my mother. Teaching martial arts? What kind of martial arts? Kung Fu. Wing Chun primarily. And my own approach, which synthesizes different styles. Patterson nodded slowly. Making decision. I'm going to need to inspect your bag thoroughly. A lot of people coming from Hong Kong try to bring martial arts weapons through customs. Nunchucks, throwing stars, bladed weapons. Need to make sure you're not importing contraband. Bruce kept his voice calm. Professional. Of course. I understand. I'm not carrying any weapons. Just personal belongings and gifts for my children. We'll see about that. Put your bag on the table. Open it. The tone wasn't professional courtesy. It was something harder. Something that made the passengers behind Bruce in line look up. Something that signaled this wasn't routine inspection. This was targeted. This was statement being made. Bruce placed his bag on the stainless steel inspection table. Unzipped it. Stepped back. It's open. Patterson didn't just look inside. He started pulling items out. Not carefully. Not respectfully. Just dumping contents onto the table. Making a show of it. Making sure the other passengers could see. Making sure everyone understood that he was conducting thorough inspection. That he was doing his job. That even semi-famous kung fu actors got checked. First item, Bruce's training uniform. Black cotton pants and shirt. Well worn. Patterson held it up. Martial arts uniform. Training GI. What's this for? I'm a martial arts instructor. That's what my class is. It's clothing. Patterson tossed it on the table. Reached in for more. Training equipment. Wooden dummy arm. Component of Wing Chun training equipment. Resistance bands. Small weights. Patterson held up the wooden piece. What's this? Weapon. It's part of training equipment. Wooden dummy. For practicing techniques. It's a training tool, not a weapon. Could be used as weapon. Could be club. Need to verify it's legal. Patterson set it aside. Not because he actually thought it was illegal. Just to demonstrate his authority. To make Bruce wait. To make the inspection take longer. More items. The gifts for Brandon and Shannon. Stuffed panda bear. Wooden toy cars. Picture books in Chinese. Children's puzzle sets. Patterson barely glanced at them. Just pushed them aside. Not interested in things that didn't fit his narrative. Not interested in evidence that Bruce was just father bringing gifts home to his children. Philosophy books came next. Several thick volumes in Chinese. Couple in English. Taoism. Buddhism. Western philosophy. Spinoza. Hegel. Krishnamurti. Patterson held up one of the Chinese texts. What's this? Kung Fu Manual. Instructions for weapons? It's all in Chinese. Could be anything. Bruce's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed level. That's the Tao Te Ching. Ancient Chinese philosophical text. Classic of Taoist philosophy. You can have it translated if you doubt me. Any Chinese speaker can verify what it is. Patterson wasn't interested in verification. Sure it is. I'll hold on to this for now. He set it aside with the wooden dummy piece. Building a small pile of items he was questioning. Other passengers were watching now. The line had slowed. People 3 for back were craning their necks to see what was happening. Why was the inspection taking so long? Why was the officer pulling out every single item? Why was he making comments about each one? Robert Chun was 4th in line. Chinese-American businessman. 45 years old. Had traveled internationally hundreds of times. had been through customs in dozens of countries, had experienced this kind of targeted harassment before, knew exactly what was happening. Patterson was racially profiling, was targeting Bruce because he was Asian, because he was coming from Hong Kong, because he fit Patterson's prejudiced assumptions about what Asian travelers smuggled. Robert pulled out a small notebook, started taking notes, wrote down Patterson's badge number from his uniform, wrote down the time, started documenting what he was witnessing. If this went too far, Robert was prepared to file formal complaint, was prepared to provide witness testimony, was prepared to stand up against exactly this kind of abuse of authority. Patterson continued dumping Bruce's belongings onto the table. Training notes, seminar materials, personal items, everything treated as potential contraband, everything examined with exaggerated suspicion. Then Patterson found the letters. Several envelopes, some opened, some sealed. Personal correspondence. Patterson held up the opened letters, started reading them. Not thoroughly, just skimming. Enough to be invasive, enough to violate privacy. Letters from Hong Kong. Who are these people? Students? Associates? They're personal letters, from friends and students. Thank you notes from people who attended my seminars. Patterson read snippets aloud. Mocking tone. Thank you, Sifu, for the wisdom you shared. Your teaching has changed my approach to martial arts. Who are these people? How do you know them? Bruce's patience was wearing thin. His voice got harder. They're students. People I taught in Hong Kong. Those are personal thank you letters. You have no grounds to question my private correspondence. Patterson smirked. I have every ground. I'm customs officer. I determine what needs to be questioned. You're importing correspondence from foreign country. I need to verify you're not involved in illegal activity, not coordinating smuggling operations, not communicating in code. Those are thank you letters from martial arts students. There's no code. There's no illegal activity. This is harassment. This is thorough inspection. There's a difference. Patterson found another letter. This one different. Higher quality envelope. Expensive paper. Formal address. Still sealed. Bruce hadn't opened it yet. Patterson held it up. This one's sealed. Unopened. What's in here? I don't know. I haven't opened it. It's personal correspondence. It arrived just before I left Hong Kong. I was going to read it on the plane, but I was tired. Could contain anything. Could be contraband. Instructions. Money. Drugs. I need to inspect it. Bruce's voice was firm now. Warning clear. That's sealed personal correspondence. You don't have legal authority to open sealed mail without probable cause. Mail privacy is protected under federal law. I'm telling you this now. If you open that letter without legitimate cause, you're committing federal offense. Patterson's face flushed. He didn't like being challenged. Didn't like being told what he could and couldn't do. Especially by Asian martial arts actor who should be grateful for being allowed into the country. I have probable cause. You're traveling from foreign country. This envelope could contain illegal materials. I'm opening it. That's within my authority. It's not within your authority. I'm advising you, in front of all these witnesses, that opening sealed personal mail without legitimate cause violates federal law. Specifically, Title 18, United States Code, Section 1702. I know the law. I'm giving you opportunity to stop before you violate it. Other passengers were listening now. The line had completely stopped. Everyone watching. Some recognized the situation for what it was, abuse of authority. Some are uncomfortable. Some are curious to see how this would play out. Robert Chen wrote down Bruce's exact words. Wrote down the legal citation. Documented that Bruce had explicitly warned Patterson about the law. That Patterson had been given every opportunity to stop. Patterson made his decision. Pride. Authority. Refusal to be lectured by someone he viewed as foreigner, even though Bruce was legal permanent resident. Refusal to back down in front of audience. I'm opening it. Step back. Bruce stepped back. Face neutral. Eyes hard. He'd given the warning. Patterson had chosen to ignore it. Now Patterson would face consequences of that choice. Bruce wasn't going to stop him. Was going to let him commit the violation. Was going to let him cross the line. Because sometimes you teach people by letting them make their mistakes and then holding them accountable for those mistakes. Patterson tore open the envelope, ripped it carelessly, pulled out the letter inside. Expensive stationery. Official letterhead. Handwritten note in careful script. Patterson started reading it aloud. Wanted to humiliate Bruce. Wanted passengers to hear whatever secrets this private letter contained. Wanted to demonstrate his authority to open anything, to read anything, to inspect anything he deemed suspicious. Dear Bruce, Patterson read, his voice dripping with mock formality. I wanted to write to thank you personally for the time you've spent teaching my son David. Some passengers shifted uncomfortably. This was private letter. Father writing about his son. This shouldn't be read aloud in public space. But Patterson continued. When David came to you 6 months ago, he was struggling, directionless, angry at the world and at me. I just returned from my second tour in Vietnam. Our relationship was strained. He was making destructive choices, getting into fights, skipping school, heading towards serious trouble. Bruce's face showed nothing but his hands were clenched. This was deeply personal letter. Father's private expression of concern for his son, being broadcast to strangers in airport customs area, being mocked by officer who was violating multiple laws to satisfy his prejudice. Patterson kept reading. You've given him discipline, focus, and purpose. You've been mentor to him when he needed one most. When I couldn't reach him, when he shut me out because of his anger about the war, about my absence, about everything, you got through to him. You've taught him not just martial arts, but philosophy, self-control, respect, values I tried to instill but failed to make stick. You succeeded where I failed. The mocking tone in Patterson's voice was fading. The letter's emotional weight was cutting through his prejudice. This wasn't smuggling coordination, wasn't coded instructions. This was Father's heartfelt gratitude. But Patterson kept reading, too committed now to stop. You've taught him that strength isn't about anger or violence. That discipline is foundation for everything. That respect for others starts with respect for yourself. These lessons have transformed him. He's back in school. His grades have improved. He set goals for his future. He's become the young man I always hoped he'd be. And it's because of you. Passengers were silent. Some had tears in their eyes. This was beautiful letter. Expression of parental gratitude that anyone could relate to. And it was being violated. Being read without permission. Being broadcast in public space. The wrongness of what Patterson was doing was becoming undeniable even to those who'd been neutral about the inspection. Patterson was near the end. His voice had lost its mockery. Was just reading now. As a father and as a military officer, I can't express how grateful I am. You changed my son's life. You've given him tools he'll carry forever. You've been teacher, mentor, and friend when he desperately needed all three. Thank you. With deep respect and gratitude, Patterson looked at the signature. His voice stopped. Mid-word. The blood drained from his face. The smirk that had been there since the inspection began vanished completely. He stood frozen, still holding the letter, staring at the signature line like he was seeing ghost. The signature read, Major General William Morrison, United States Army, Department of Defense. Complete silence in the customs area. 50 passengers holding their breath. Robert Shin stopped writing. Just watched, waiting to see what would happen next. Patterson couldn't move, couldn't speak. His mind was racing through implications. He just illegally opened sealed personal correspondence, had read it aloud in public space, had violated the privacy of U.S. Army General, had broadcast private family matters to 50 strangers, had done all of this while conducting what could easily be characterized as racially motivated harassment, had done it in front of dozens of witnesses, had done it after being explicitly warned that he was violating federal law, had done it anyway because his pride and prejudice wouldn't let him back down. His career was over. He knew it. In that moment, holding that letter, seeing that signature, Patterson knew he'd just destroyed everything he'd built in 22 years of civil service. Federal offense. Military general involved. 50 witnesses. This would be in newspapers. Would be investigated. Would result in prosecution. He was finished. Bruce spoke. Voice quiet. Calm, but with steel underneath. Every word carefully chosen. Every word witnessed and documented. That was sealed personal correspondence from a student's father. You just violated federal law, specifically 18 U.S.C. Section 1702, which prohibits opening sealed mail without legal authority. You did this in front of approximately 50 witnesses after I explicitly warned you about the law. You also violated my privacy, General Morrison's privacy, and his son David's privacy by reading private family matters aloud in public space. I'd like to speak with your supervisor. Immediately, Patterson tried to speak. His throat was dry. His voice came out as croak. I was just, it's procedure to... Bruce cut him off. It's not procedure. You know it's not procedure. You targeted me because you recognized me from television. Because you have prejudices about Asian people and martial artists. You assumed I was smuggling weapons because of my race and my profession. You conducted unnecessarily aggressive inspection to assert your authority. And when I objected to you opening sealed mail, when I explicitly warned you that you were violating federal law, you did it anyway. That's not procedure. That's abuse of authority. That's racial profiling. That's federal crime. Now get your supervisor. Every word was true. Every accusation was accurate. Patterson couldn't deny any of it. Every passenger in line had heard it, had witnessed it. Several had taken notes. Robert Shin stepped forward. I witnessed everything. I have your badge number. Patterson, Donald, badge 7432. I took notes on every statement you made, every action you took. I documented that Mr. Lee warned you explicitly about federal law, and you proceeded anyway. I'm prepared to provide testimony if needed. I'm prepared to sign affidavit. And I'm prepared to contact my attorney if this isn't resolved appropriately. Other passengers murmured agreement. Several held up their own notebooks. Several nodded. The witnesses were ready. The documentation was extensive. Patterson had no way out. Footsteps approached rapidly. James Mitchell, customs supervisor, had heard the commotion, had been in his office doing paperwork when he heard raised voices, had come to investigate. Mitchell was 55 years old, had supervised customs operations at LAX for 12 years. Knew Patterson sometimes pushed boundaries, had warned him before about profiling, had told him to inspect everyone equally, had tried to correct the behavior, apparently hadn't succeeded. Mitchell saw the scene, items dumped all over the inspection table, Patterson standing frozen with letter in his hand. Bruce Lee. Mitchell recognized him, knew who he was, standing with arms crossed, face calm but eyes hard. 50 passengers watching. This was bad. This was very bad. Mitchell approached quickly. What's happening here? Patterson couldn't answer, couldn't find words, couldn't explain without admitting everything. Bruce explained, calmly, precisely, voice carrying to all the witnesses. Officer Patterson conducted inspection of my luggage. He pulled out every item, made comments implying I was smuggling martial arts weapons despite having no evidence. He read my private correspondence aloud. Then he found a sealed letter, personal correspondence I hadn't yet opened. I warned him explicitly that opening sealed mail without probable cause violates federal law. I cited the specific statute. He opened it anyway. He read it aloud in this public space, violating my privacy and the privacy of the letter's author. The author is Major General William Morrison, U.S. Army, Department of Defense. The letter contains private family matters that have now been broadcast to approximately 50 passengers. Multiple witnesses documented the entire incident. I'm requesting formal complaint process. Mitchell's face remained professional, but his mind was calculating the disaster. Federal law violation. Military general involved. 50 witnesses. Documentation. This wasn't going to be quiet. This wasn't going to be internal discipline. This was going to be investigation. Prosecution. Media coverage. Lawsuits. Everything that ruins careers and creates nightmares for supervisors. Mitchell looked at Patterson. Is this accurate? Patterson nodded slowly. Couldn't deny it. Too many witnesses. Too much documentation. Mitchell looked at the letter still in Patterson's hand. May I see that? Patterson handed it over like it was burning his fingers. Mitchell read it quickly. Confirmed everything Bruce had said. Private letter from General thanking Bruce for mentoring his troubled son. Nothing remotely suspicious. Nothing that justified opening it. Just father's gratitude being violated in broadcast. Mitchell handed the letter to Bruce. Mr. Lee, I apologize deeply. This is completely unacceptable. Officer Patterson will be suspended immediately pending formal investigation. I need to ask you some questions for the incident report. Then we'll expedite the rest of your customs clearance and get you on your way. This was the moment. This was where Bruce made his choice. He could pursue this fully, file formal complaint, press for prosecution, call General Morrison and inform him that his private letter had been violated and broadcast publicly. Use his connections, and Bruce had connections beyond just the general, to ensure Patterson was prosecuted to fullest extent. Patterson would lose his job, would face federal charges, would possibly go to prison, would certainly have his career and reputation destroyed. Bruce had every legal right to do this, had every moral justification. Patterson had targeted him based on race, had harassed him publicly, had violated federal law after explicit warning, had earned everything that was about to happen to him. Or Bruce could teach, could demonstrate principle he'd spent his life developing. Use minimum necessary force. Apply just enough power to correct the situation. Don't destroy when you can educate. Don't crush when you can transform. Real strength isn't about how much damage you can do. It's about choosing when to do damage and when to show mercy. Bruce looked at Patterson, really looked at him. Saw a scared man who'd made terrible mistake. Saw a civil servant who'd let prejudice corrupt his judgment. Saw someone who just learned the hardest lesson of his career. Saw someone who would never forget this moment, who would carry this for the rest of his life, who was already being punished by his own recognition of what he'd done. Bruce looked at Mitchell. I need a moment to consider how I want to proceed. May I have 5 minutes? Mitchell nodded. Of course. Take all the time you need. He turned to Patterson. Go my office. Now. Don't speak to anyone. Don't leave. Wait for me. Patterson walked away, shoulders slumped, face pale, looking like man walking to execution. 50 passengers watched him go, some satisfied that authority had been challenged, some uncomfortable with the whole situation, some just wanted to get through customs and get home. Bruce stood at the inspection table, looking at his belongings scattered across the stainless steel surface, looking at the letter in his hand, General Morrison's private gratitude now known to 50 strangers, looking at the gifts for his children, looking at his philosophy books, everything that mattered to him, everything that defined him, all of it dumped and pawed through by a man who'd assumed the worst based on prejudice. Robert Chun approached quietly. Mr. Lee, I have extensive notes. I'm happy to provide them for your complaint. What Patterson did was wrong, on multiple levels. He should face consequences. Bruce nodded. Thank you. I appreciate that. Can I ask you, what do you think the consequences should be? If you were me, what would you do? Robert considered. 5 years ago, I would have said destroy him. File everything. Prosecute fully. Make example. But I'm older now. I've seen what happens when you destroy people. Sometimes they learn. Sometimes they just become bitter. Sometimes punishment creates more problems than it solves. If it was me, and I'm not saying you should do this, just what I might do, I'd want him to learn. Really learn. Not just fear consequences, but understand why what he did was wrong. Understand the prejudice behind it. Change his behavior going forward. That's harder than just punishing him, but more valuable if it works. Bruce smiled slightly. That's wise. Thank you. Linda Lee was home with Brandon and Shannon, expecting Bruce to arrive around 5 p.m. It was now 3:45. Bruce thought about his children, about the letter from General Morrison thanking him for teaching David, about teaching in general, about what it meant to be teacher. Teachers don't just impart knowledge. They transform people. They take someone who doesn't understand and help them understand. They take someone who's making mistakes and show them a better way. They create change that lasts. Patterson had made terrible mistake, multiple mistakes, built on foundation of prejudice that had probably been unchallenged for years. Destroying him wouldn't change that prejudice, would just make him resentful, would make him victim in his own mind instead of person who learned important lesson. But teaching him, really teaching him, that might create actual change, Might transform person who profiled Asian travelers into person who treated everyone with respect. Might prevent this from happening to next Asian passenger. Might ripple outward to other officers who saw what happened and learned from it. That was worth more than punishment, worth more than revenge, worth more than satisfaction of seeing someone who wronged you suffer consequences. Teaching created transformation. Punishment just created resentment. Bruce made his decision. He went to Mitchell's office. Knocked. Mitchell called, "Come in." Bruce entered. Patterson was sitting in chair and corner, looking at the floor, looking like he wanted to disappear. Mitchell was at his desk, already starting incident report, already calculating how to minimize institutional damage. Bruce spoke to Mitchell. "I've decided how I want to proceed. I'm not going to file formal complaint. I'm not going to pursue federal charges. I'm not going to contact General Morrison about this incident unless Patterson's behavior doesn't change going forward." Patterson's head snapped up, disbelief on his face. Mitchell's expression showed surprise. "Mr. Lee, you have every right to file complaint. What Officer Patterson did was serious violation. You don't have to." Bruce interrupted. "I know I don't have to. I'm choosing not to. But I have conditions. Officer Patterson will apologize. Publicly. In front of the same passengers who witnessed his harassment. He will acknowledge specifically what he did wrong. The racial profiling, the abuse of authority, the violation of privacy, the breaking of federal law. He will acknowledge it not because I'm forcing him, but because he genuinely understands why it was wrong. And he will commit, publicly, to changing his behavior going forward, to treating all passengers with equal respect regardless of race or national origin. If he can do that, if he can demonstrate genuine understanding and genuine commitment to change, then I'll consider this resolved. No formal complaint. No federal charges. No contact with General Morrison. Just lesson learned and behavior changed." Mitchell looked at Patterson. "Can you do that?" Patterson looked at Bruce. Really looked at him for the first time. Saw not martial arts actor or kung fu stereotype or smuggling suspect. Saw man he'd wronged. Man who had every right to destroy his career. Man who was offering mercy instead. Offering chance to learn. Offering opportunity to transform mistake into growth. Patterson's eyes filled with tears. He nodded. "Yes, I can do that. I will do that. Because you're right. Everything you said was right. I targeted you because of your race. I assumed you were smuggling because you're Asian and martial artist. I abused my authority to assert power over you. I violated your privacy. I broke federal law after you warned me. I did all of it because I have prejudices I've never examined, never questioned, never challenged. And you're giving me a chance to change that, to learn from this, to become better person and better officer. Thank you. That's more mercy than I deserve." Bruce nodded. "Then let's go back to the customs area. Let's complete this properly." They walked back together. Bruce, Mitchell, Patterson. The customs area was still crowded. The line had moved. Other officers had taken over the inspection desks, but many of the 50 passengers who'd witnessed the incident were still there, collecting luggage, waiting for rides, curious to see how this would end. Robert Chun was still there, had delayed his own departure to witness the resolution, to make sure justice was served in some form. Mitchell addressed the crowd. "Can I have your attention, please? For those of you who witnessed the incident at Officer Patterson's desk approximately 20 minutes ago, Officer Patterson has something he wants to say." Patterson stepped forward, faced the crowd, faced all the witnesses to his harassment and his mistake. His voice was shaking but clear. "My name is Donald Patterson. I'm a customs officer, 22 years of service. About 20 minutes ago, I conducted inspection of Mr. Bruce Lee's luggage. I did so in a way that was inappropriate, unprofessional, and illegal. I targeted Mr. Lee for aggressive inspection because I recognized him as a martial artist traveling from Hong Kong. I assumed, based on his race and his profession, that he was likely to be smuggling weapons or contraband. That assumption was racist. I pulled every item from his bag. I made mocking comments about martial arts and kung fu. I implied he was criminal without evidence. That was abuse of my authority. I read his private correspondence aloud. Then I opened sealed personal letter despite Mr. Lee's explicit warning that doing so would violate federal law. I did it anyway because my pride wouldn't let me back down. That was federal crime. I violated Mr. Lee's privacy. I violated the privacy of the letter's author and his family. I did all of this because I have racial prejudices I've never examined or challenged. He paused, took breath, continued. Mr. Lee has every legal right to file formal complaint against me, to press federal charges, to end my career. I deserve that. I earned that through my actions. But Mr. Lee has chosen mercy instead of punishment, has chosen to give me opportunity to learn from this, to change my behavior, to become a better person and better officer. I don't fully understand why he's showing me this mercy, but I'm grateful for it. And I commit publicly in front of all of you as witnesses to changing, to examining my prejudices, to treating all passengers with equal respect regardless of race, national origin, or profession, to never again profiling someone based on my assumptions rather than evidence, to using my authority to serve rather than to dominate, to remembering this moment whenever I'm tempted to abuse my power, to honoring Mr. Lee's mercy by becoming the officer I should have been today. I am sorry. To Mr. Lee, to all of you who had to witness my abuse of authority, to everyone who's been subjected to racial profiling at customs, I am sorry, and I will do better. Silence. Then one person started clapping, then another, then Robert Chun, then more. Not enthusiastic applause, not celebration, just acknowledgement. Acknowledgement that what they'd just witnessed was rare, was important, was transformation happening in real time, was example of how conflict can be resolved not through punishment, but through teaching, through mercy that creates change rather than resentment. Bruce accepted the apology with a bow. Simple gesture, respectful, acknowledging Patterson's vulnerability and courage in making public apology, acknowledging the learning that was happening, acknowledging the possibility of transformation. Mitchell cleared Bruce's luggage without further inspection, helped him repack his belongings, apologized again on behalf of the Customs Service. Bruce just nodded, thanked him, picked up his bag, walked toward the exit. Robertson caught up with him. Mr. Lee, can I ask you something? Why did you show him mercy? After what he did, why didn't you file complaint? Bruce paused. Because punishment doesn't change behavior. Fear of consequences doesn't eliminate prejudice. It just makes people hide it better. Real change happens when someone understands why they were wrong, when they feel the weight of their mistake and choose to grow from it. Patterson will remember this for the rest of his life. Will remember the moment he realized he'd just destroyed his career. Will remember that I had power to finish the job and chose not to. That lesson, that experience of receiving mercy when you deserve punishment, that changes people. That creates transformation. Filing complaint would have punished him. Showing mercy teaches him. I'm a teacher. Teaching is always my first choice. Robert nodded slowly. That's profound. Thank you for the example. I think everyone who witnessed this learned something today. Not just Patterson. Bruce smiled. That's my hope. Bruce arrived home at 5:15. Linda heard the door and came running with Brandon and Shannon. Brandon shouted, "Daddy's home," and jumped into Bruce's arms. Shannon, still unsteady on her almost 2-year-old legs, waddled over as fast as she could. Bruce hugged them both, kissed Linda, finally relaxed, finally home. After the kids were in bed, Bruce told Linda what happened. The whole story. Patterson's harassment. The letter being opened and read aloud. The signature that had destroyed Patterson's confidence. The choice Bruce had made. The public apology. Linda listened without interrupting. When Bruce finished, she was quiet for a moment. "You showed him mercy," she said finally, "even though he deserved punishment." "I did. Why? After he humiliated you? After he violated your privacy and General Morrison's privacy? After he broke federal law? Why give him another chance?" Bruce thought about how to explain it. Remember when we talked about martial arts philosophy? About using minimum necessary force? That applies to everything, not just physical conflicts. Patterson needed to learn, needed to understand his prejudice and change his behavior. But did I need to destroy his career to accomplish that? Did I need to prosecute him? Did I need to ruin his life? No. I just needed him to genuinely understand what he did wrong and commit to changing. The public apology accomplished that. The humiliation of having to acknowledge his prejudice in front of 50 witnesses accomplished that. The experience of receiving mercy when he expected destruction accomplished that. He'll carry that lesson forever. He'll be better officer because of it. And I didn't have to destroy him to achieve that outcome. Minimum necessary force. Applies to everything. Linda smiled. You're a good teacher. Not just of martial arts. Of wisdom. I try. That's what a man taught me. Martial arts isn't about fighting. It's about understanding. About discipline. About becoming a better person. Patterson gave me opportunity to demonstrate that today. To show that strength isn't about how much damage you can do. It's about choosing when to show power and when to show mercy. I choose merci. Today. Not because I'm weak, but because I'm strong enough to choose. 1 week later, Bruce received a letter. Handwritten. Addressed to him at his home. The return address was Donald Patterson's. Bruce opened it carefully. Dear Mr. Lee, I'm writing to thank you and to update you on changes I've made since our encounter at LAX. First, thank you. Thank you for showing me mercy I didn't deserve. Thank you for giving me opportunity to learn instead of just punish me. Thank you for believing I could change. This week has been most difficult of my career, but also most important. I've spent 22 years as customs officer. I thought I was good at my job. Thought I was protecting America by being thorough, being vigilant. But what I called thoroughness was often prejudice. What I called vigilance was often racism. I profiled Asian travelers, Hispanic travelers, Middle Eastern travelers, anyone who didn't look like me. I told myself it was just good instincts, just pattern recognition, just experience teaching me who to watch carefully. But it was racism, plain and simple, and I never examined it, never questioned it, never challenged my assumptions. Until you forced me to. I've spoken with my supervisor. I've requested additional training on cultural sensitivity and bias recognition. I've committed to tracking my own inspection patterns to identify any racial disparities. I've started reading books about implicit bias and systemic racism. I'm examining beliefs I've held my entire life. It's uncomfortable. It's difficult, but it's necessary. You could have destroyed my career. You had every right and every legal justification. Instead, you gave me a chance to become a better person. I'm trying to honor that gift by actually changing. Not just in my behavior. That's easy. That's just fear of consequences. But in my understanding, in my worldview, in my fundamental approach to my work and to other people. I don't expect you to forgive me completely. I don't expect us to become friends. But I wanted you to know that your mercy wasn't wasted. That I'm taking this seriously. That I'm changing. Thank you. Respectfully, Donald Patterson. Bruce read the letter twice. Showed it to Linda. She read it and smiled. He's learning. Really learning. You were right to show him mercy. Time will tell. Words are easy. Sustained behavior change is hard. But this letter suggests he understands. That's a good start. 6 months later, Bruce was teaching class at his Jun Fan Gung Fu Institute in Los Angeles. Private session with select students. Working on chi saw, sticky hands exercise, when one of his students asked to speak with him after class. The student was David Morrison, 18 years old, son of General Morrison. The student whose transformation had prompted his father to write the letter that Patterson had violated. After class ended and other students left, David approached Bruce. Sifu, I need to tell you something. About the incident at the airport. With the customs officer. I know what happened. My father told me. Bruce nodded. I assumed he would. How is your father? He's fine. He was angry when he found out. Wanted to file formal complaint himself. Wanted to use his position to ensure Patterson was prosecuted. But I asked him not to. Told him you'd already handled it. That you'd chosen mercy over punishment. That forcing prosecution after you'd made that choice would dishonor your decision. He respected that. But he wanted you to know that he's grateful. Not just for teaching me, but for how you handled the violation of his privacy. With wisdom and restraint. Bruce smiled. Thank you. Tell your father I appreciated his letter. Even though it was read to 50 strangers at LAX, the sentiment meant a great deal to me. Seeing your transformation over the past 6 months has been rewarding. That's the real gift, watching students grow. David hesitated, then continued. There's something else. Something I learned recently that you should know. Patterson, the customs officer, he's been telling the story. About what happened that day. About how he racially profiled you. About how he violated your privacy. About how you could have destroyed his career but showed mercy instead. He's using it as teaching example. He's speaking to other customs officers, training sessions, talking about implicit bias, about abuse of authority, about what real strength looks like. He's turning his mistake into education for others. I thought you should know that your decision to show mercy is rippling outward, teaching more people than just Patterson. Bruce was quiet for a moment. Then, that's good. That's what I hoped would happen. Not that he'd promote me or make me look good, but that he'd learn something deep enough that he'd want to share it. That he'd transform his prejudice into wisdom and then pass that wisdom forward. That's how change happens. One person at a time. One realization at a time. One choice to grow instead of defend. Patterson made terrible mistake, but he's using it to become a better person and to help others avoid same mistake. That's honorable. That's what I hoped mercy would create. David bowed deeply. Thank you, Sifu, for teaching me martial arts, for teaching my father about who I could become, for teaching Patterson about his prejudices, for teaching all of us what strength really means. You're not just martial arts instructor. You're teacher of wisdom. That's rare. That's valuable. That's what I want to become. Not just skilled martial artist, but wise person who knows when to fight and when to show mercy. That's the real lesson. Thank you. The years passed. Bruce's career took off. The Big Boss in 1971. Fist of Fury in 1972. Way of the Dragon in 1972. Enter the Dragon released after his death in 1973, making him international icon. The airport incident with Patterson became footnote. Minor story, not widely known. Bruce never publicized it, never used it to promote himself, never told interviewers about the time he showed mercy to racist customs officer. It was just personal choice, personal teaching moment, not material for public consumption. But the story survived, passed down through the people who witnessed it, through David Morrison, through Robert Shun, through the other passengers who'd seen Bruce make choice between punishment and mercy, through Patterson himself, who continued telling it in training sessions for customs officers, teaching about bias, about abuse of authority, about transformation through accountability and mercy. Donald Patterson retired from customs service in 1989 after 38 years of service. His final years were marked by commendations for cultural sensitivity training, for mentoring younger officers about avoiding racial profiling, for creating more equitable inspection processes. His supervisors noted in his retirement evaluation that Patterson had undergone remarkable transformation in his approach to his work and to travelers from different backgrounds. That transformation was dated to March 1971, to the incident with Bruce Lee, to the moment when Patterson's prejudice met consequences and then met mercy. That moment had defined the rest of his career. Patterson died in 2003 at age 79. His obituary mentioned his customs career, mentioned his work on bias training, mentioned that he'd been inspired to change his approach after personal incident where his own prejudice had nearly destroyed his career, mentioned that he'd spent his final decades trying to prevent other officers from making same mistakes. David Morrison, now 49 years old, successful attorney, still training in martial arts, attended Patterson's funeral, stood in the back, paid respects to man who'd wronged his teacher but who'd learned from it, who'd transformed himself, who'd honored Bruce's mercy by becoming a better person. At the funeral reception, Patterson's daughter approached David. "You're David Morrison. My father talked about you, about your father, about your teacher Bruce Lee, about the incident at the airport in 1971. He said it was a turning point in his life. Said Bruce Lee taught him more about strength in 15 minutes than he'd learned in 50 years. Said showing mercy to someone who doesn't deserve it is harder than punishing them. More powerful, more transformative. He carried that lesson until he died. Made me promise to thank Bruce Lee if I ever met him. Since Bruce is gone, can I thank you instead? Thank you for having teacher who showed my father mercy, who changed his life, who made him a better man." David accepted her thanks, shared his own gratitude that Patterson had honored the mercy he'd been shown, had transformed himself, had passed the lesson forward. In 2020, Robert Chun, now 85 years old, gave interview to martial arts documentary filmmaker. The filmmaker was collecting stories about Bruce Lee's life in Los Angeles before he became famous. Robert shared the airport story, shared his notes from that day, shared his perspective on what he'd witnessed. I've thought about that incident for 49 years. I was prepared to see Bruce Lee destroy that customs officer, was prepared to testify in support of federal charges, expected to see punishment, maximum consequences. Instead, I witnessed mercy, strategic mercy, mercy that accomplished everything punishment would have accomplished, teaching, transformation, behavior change, without destroying anyone. That's wisdom most people never achieve. Most of us think strength is about how much damage we can do to people who wrong us. Bruce understood that real strength is choosing when to do damage and when to teach, when to destroy and when to transform. I learned more about conflict resolution in that customs area than I learned in 40 years of business negotiations. Mercy is more powerful than punishment when applied wisely. That's what Bruce demonstrated that day. The documentary was released in 2021. The airport incident was featured prominently. Robert Chin's interview, David Morrison's testimony, Patterson's daughter sharing her father's transformation. The letter from General Morrison was shown. Linda Lee Cadwell had preserved it, shared it for the documentary. The story was complete, documented, verified, real. It went viral in ways none of the participants could have predicted. Not because it was a dramatic fight scene, not because Bruce had demonstrated physical skill, but because it demonstrated wisdom, demonstrated restraint, demonstrated that real martial arts philosophy applies to all conflicts, not just physical ones. Use minimum necessary force. Achieve your objective with least damage. Transform rather than destroy when possible. Win without creating permanent enemies. These principles resonated, made the story relevant beyond martial arts community, made an example of how to handle injustice, how to respond to prejudice, how to correct without crushing, how to teach rather than punish. Shannon Lee, Bruce's daughter, now in her 50s, released statement through the Bruce Lee Foundation. The airport incident exemplifies what my father believed about martial arts and about life. He could have destroyed Patterson, had every right to, had every legal justification. But he chose teaching over punishment. Chose transformation over destruction. That's martial arts philosophy applied to real life. That's what my father practiced every day, not just in the studio, but in the world, using his skills, his knowledge, his power to help people grow rather than to prove his dominance. This story shows who he really was. Not just fighter, not just actor, but teacher who understood that real strength is choosing mercy when you could choose destruction. The story became teaching example in conflict resolution courses, in diversity training programs, in leadership seminars, in courses on restorative justice versus punitive justice. Bruce Lee's choice at LAX became case study in how mercy can transform while punishment often just creates resentment. How acknowledging power without fully using it can be more impactful than exercising power to its fullest extent. How teaching enemy can be more valuable than destroying them. Christina Walsh, professor of conflict resolution at Georgetown University, used the story in her classes. What makes the Bruce Lee airport incident so instructive is that he had complete moral and legal justification for maximum punishment. Patterson had violated federal law, had done it in front of 50 witnesses, had done it after explicit warning. Bruce could have destroyed his career without any criticism. Everyone would have said Patterson deserved it. But Bruce chose differently, chose to exercise power by not fully using it, chose to teach rather than punish. And the result was transformation. Patterson changed, became advocate for the very principles he'd violated, taught other officers to avoid his mistakes, turned his prejudice into wisdom and shared that wisdom widely. That transformation wouldn't have happened through punishment. Punishment would have made Patterson victim in his own mind, would have created resentment rather than growth. But mercy, strategic mercy combined with accountability, that created real change. That's the lesson modern justice systems need to learn. David Morrison, at 73 years old in 2024, still taught the story to his own students. He continued training in martial arts for 53 years, had earned master rankings in multiple styles, had opened his own school in Virginia, had taught hundreds of students, and he taught them not just techniques, but philosophy, not just how to fight, but when to fight and when to show mercy. My teacher Bruce Lee saved my father's career, David would tell his students. Not by teaching him martial arts, by teaching a customs officer named Patterson about mercy and transformation. Patterson racially profiled Bruce, harassed him, violated his privacy, broke federal law, earned maximum punishment. But Bruce chose minimum necessary force, chose to achieve his objective, correcting Patterson's behavior with least damage. Gave Patterson chance to learn and grow instead of just destroying him. That's martial arts philosophy. That's what this training is about. Not learning how to hurt people. Learning when to hurt people and when to help them grow. Learning to use power wisely. Learning that mercy is often stronger than punishment. That's what Bruce taught. That's what I try to pass on to you. In 2024, 53 years after the incident, Shannon Lee visited LAX for documentary filming. Stood in the international arrivals terminal where her father had been harassed, where he'd made choice that would ripple through decades, where he demonstrated that real strength isn't about physical power or even about legal power. It's about wisdom to know when to use power and when to show mercy. The customs area had been renovated multiple times. Didn't look the same, but Shannon stood where her father had stood, where Donald Patterson had made terrible mistake, where 50 passengers had witnessed abuse of authority, where Bruce had made choice, where mercy had transformed everyone involved. Shannon spoke to the camera. People remember my father for his speed, his power, his physical capabilities, and those were extraordinary. But this story, this moment in this airport, this shows his real strength, his wisdom, his understanding that martial arts isn't about fighting. It's about choosing when to fight and when to teach, when to destroy and when to transform. My father could have destroyed Patterson. Instead, he transformed him, transformed his prejudice into wisdom, transformed his mistake into teaching opportunity, transformed his abuse of authority into example of accountability and growth. That's legacy. That's what martial arts philosophy produces when truly understood and truly lived. Not fighters, teachers, people who make the world better through wisdom and mercy, not just through power. The documentary ended with simple title card. Donald Patterson taught bias awareness training to customs officers for 18 years. He credited Bruce Lee's mercy as the catalyst for his transformation. Bruce Lee never publicly discussed the incident. When asked why, he reportedly said, "Teaching isn't about taking credit. It's about creating change." Patterson's transformation and the thousands of officers he subsequently trained stands as testament to the power of strategic mercy. Bruce Lee demonstrated that day what he taught in the studio. Real strength is knowing when to fight and when to teach, when to destroy and when to transform, when to use power and when to show mercy. The strongest response isn't always the harshest one. The customs officer made Bruce Lee apologize? No. Bruce Lee made the officer understand why respect matters more than authority. Made him understand why mercy can transform while punishment often just destroys. Made him understand that real strength is choosing when to use power and when to show restraint. A letter. A private letter from grateful father. That's what was in Bruce's bag. Not weapons. Not contraband. Not anything illegal. Just gratitude. Just acknowledgement of teaching that had transformed troubled son. That letter, violated and broadcast, became teaching moment itself. Became demonstration of principle Bruce had spent his life developing. Became proof that martial arts philosophy applies to all conflicts. Became example that would ripple through decades, transforming not just Patterson, but everyone who heard the story. March 8th, 1971. LAX International Terminal. Bruce Lee faced choice. Destroy the man who'd wronged him or teach him. Punishment or mercy. Maximum force or minimum necessary force. Bonne chose merci. Strategic mercy. Mercy that required accountability but offered transformation. Mercy that proved stronger than punishment. Mercy that created change lasting far beyond that moment in that airport. That's the story. The customs officer who thought he had authority. The martial artist who had power. And the choice that demonstrated real strength isn't about how much damage you can do. It's about choosing when to do damage and when to teach. When to destroy and when to transform. When Bruce Lee was strongest. Not when he was fighting, but when he was choosing not to fight. Choosing instead to teach. To transform. To demonstrate that wisdom with mercy creates more change than power without restraint. Patterson opened Bruce's bag, expecting to find weapons. He found a letter. But the real weapon was Bruce's wisdom. The real power was his restraint. The real victory was Patterson's transformation. That's martial arts. That's philosophy. That's strength. And it started with a letter. A private letter from grateful father. Violated. Broadcast. Transformed into teaching moment that would echo through decades. That would change lives. That would demonstrate what Bruce Lee really mastered. Not just fighting, but wisdom. Not just power, but the knowledge of when to use it and when to show mercy instead.